All right, aloha all, Michael here. Today I am going to try something a little bit new in terms of how I am presenting, only in how it's being recorded. So I'm using my phone to speak directly to you, and then I'm going to be recording from a slightly different angle on my iPad so that I can download this to my YouTube channel. So I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm not sure if I even have enough memory or storage space on my iPad to accomplish this. So this is sort of a test run. I'm going to do my best not to get distracted by looking at the iPad, but I will, of course, be aware of that angle. So this is going to be a fun experiment. Hey, Liz, welcome. Looks like we have three viewers. So welcome one, welcome all. Today we're going to talk about how to have superhuman faith. And we're going to talk about the belief system. We're going to talk about perception. And as per my means of understanding reality, we're going to talk about consciousness, awareness, and sentience, because these are important concepts to understand. So welcome. Let's see, we got Kathleen, we got, I'm going to probably mispronounce this, so I apologize. Q? Is it Q? I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. I apologize if I mispronounced it. In any case, so let's begin. Let's talk about first what faith is. So this is the topic of discussion. So when we're doing any sort of a research project, we could think of my presentations as research projects, because really what I'm doing whenever I present any material is I'm doing so for the purposes of even better understanding the material myself. So a master teacher is always a master student. I began watching maybe last week or so. I found a video by a physicist named Richard Feynman, and it was recorded in, I want to say, 1964, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm learning that this particular physicist, who incidentally won a Nobel Prize for his work, or some of his work anyway, is such an awesome teacher because he enjoys the process. I enjoy the process. I appreciate when people participate and share their points of view, their perspectives. And this is really important to understand, because if you don't enjoy what you're doing, why do it? Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to experience certain processes in life that you may not like. But when you learn to appreciate the experience, regardless of how it feels, what you're really doing is appreciating the ability to feel. The ability to feel is called sentience. This is something that everything in the universe shares. Whether we're talking about living organisms, inorganic material, or even synthetic materials, what we're doing is we're sort of classifying all of these entities as being physical in nature. In order for you to understand the two hyperstates of reality, those being physicality and non-physicality, we have to begin the conversation with understanding the difference between consciousness and awareness. And there is a difference. They are related. However, the difference is quite simple. Consciousness is responsible for quantifying the experience. Awareness is responsible for qualifying it. How do you qualify anything? Well, we qualify our reality by how we feel about it. Simple. It doesn't matter if you are logical or intuitive or whatever sort of mindset you are experiencing. We, as human beings, have the ability to determine whatever reality we wish to experience. So it's sort of a combination of free will with determinism. And this is important to understand. If you don't understand, let's say, the concepts of free will, it's because you are still learning about that concept. Regardless of the topic or the material that you are doing your research on, until you can accept why it exists, it will very likely cause you to be confused or even disturbed. So all of these things are okay. If you never got disturbed, if you never were bothered by something, would you ever feel the need to better understand it? I don't know. I don't believe so. So all of these disturbances are actually just wave interference patterns doing their job. And there's two types of wave interference. There's constructive and destructive. I like to use the word deconstructive because it makes more sense to me. By using the word destructive, you're going to have a negative connotation. But even positive and negative has sort of a misleading tendency to get you to think that one is better than the other. So, for example, let's talk about positive thinking. Positive thinking is important. However, if you never had any negative thoughts, you would never be disturbed, you would never be bothered, you would never be triggered, and therefore you would really feel perfectly fine in whatever level of awareness you are currently residing. So each point of your experience as a living, breathing human being matters. Every single experience occurs for a reason, and the chances of every experience happening for your benefit is exactly 100%. Now, that is quite a claim. And it's okay if that bothers you because it's supposed to bother you. It's supposed to get you to think. Okay? So we got a couple extra people that have joined. Georgie, welcome. If you're new to observing my presentations, just know that you are welcome to ask questions and or simply add your 2 cents to the conversation. Hey, what's up, Joey? Cousin Joey. So please feel free to ask questions and simply add your 2 cents. And I will do my best to read your questions and your comments. If at any point in time I feel like I need to catch up with the comments, I'm going to ask people to refrain from making additional comments because that moves my screen up and it makes it harder for me to read through the things. So sort of stand by for that friendly reminder if need be. Welcome, Kurt. Welcome, Mike. Welcome, everybody. So thank you for joining. I appreciate that. I am eternally grateful for the opportunity to present all of the material that I teach. I feel like my role as a philosopher has come to a point where I am still asking questions. However, I've come to enough conclusions based upon my own perception and experiences to feel compelled to share what I know. And I will also remind everybody that I never claim to know everything. I do know how to access any information. So think about it from this standpoint. If you can reach a level of awareness where you know that anything is possible, you're in a position to be more creative. use the ideas, the imagery that you perceive in your imagination to create the reality that you wish to experience. Okay? Now, what does all of this have to do with faith? Well, it comes down to two things: trust and the belief system. Now, one of the other things, or I'm going to say probably the primary focus on my work, has to do with the theory that feelings are the most effective form of communication in the universe. That whole idea, that whole concept came about when I got into a discussion with a friend of mine that I've known since we were 8 years old. And I am eternally grateful for this conversation and series of conversations, because what we were talking about is his idea that he will be able to prove that determinism is all that exists. So determinism is the idea that everything is preordained, everything is, let's say, pre-planned, and therefore everything that occurs in your reality is meant to happen because it was designed to. Now, the idea of determinism does not necessarily require the idea that God exists. When I ask my friend if he believes that God exists, he says, I don't believe that God exists, but I think it's possible. And I may have not gotten the exact wording correct. However, the idea is there. So there's this idea, really, when it comes to levels of awareness. Think of the consciousness and the awareness as having conversations. And you begin the process of having these conversations by communicating with whatever it is that you're observing. So you first make the observation, and then you process that information to a point to where it resonates with you. When something resonates with you, it makes sense. When something makes sense, you breathe easier, you feel connected, and that connection is very real. That feeling is real. Feelings, however, are non-physical entities. They are spiritual senseis. They are guiding us. They are showing us the way. They are therefore our navigators. However, we are steering the ship. We are deciding where to go. What do you wish to experience? That's going to depend on what you are thinking about, what you believe, and what you feel. We all make decisions based upon how we feel about our very real experiences. So when somebody tells you that you are wrong, they are actually imposing their will onto you. They are invalidating your experience. And not just your experience, but your very existence. So there are 8 billion uniquely qualified observers perceiving reality in their own way, and they're all expressing themselves. So every action is an expression of how you feel about your reality. Now, if I feel enlightened and happy, I'm going to have a tendency to smile, and I'm radiating how I feel about reality. So we're all projecting how we feel about what we are perceiving or what we are observing. Elisabetta, welcome, and welcome, Kurt. Thank you guys for joining. Today's discussion is called How to Have Superhuman Faith. So I will be getting to sort of that type of guidance in a while. And I will be using biblical scriptures to enforce or enhance this concept. So when we understand that there are two things that are required in order to understand faith, and those two things are trust and the belief system. So the trust comes in how you relate to reality. So remember, when something resonates with you, it's because of how you feel about that experience. Now, how do you resonate with reality? Well, you use your 5 basic senses to begin with, because your 5 basic senses actually receive the physical information. Now, the physical information is coming directly to everything on Earth via the sun, and it's called electromagnetism. So the electromagnetic spectrum is physical energy, okay? And it's all light. Now, there is a portion of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can observe with our eyes. That's called visible light. That's very small. That's very small. It's 0.0035% of the piece of this pie. Okay? Kurt says every cell has the same 5 senses. You know, interesting. I never really thought about that, but I can see the truth in it. I believe that the seemingly separation between the 5 senses is really more for our enjoyment. But we can see the crossover. For example, the relationship between smell and taste is probably the most obvious one. There is sort of built-in relationships between all of the senses. So we are actually using all of our 5 basic senses to sort of convert the signal into either light or sound. And what's interesting about that is everything to do with wave-particle duality. So if you understand wave-particle duality, which is sort of the foundation of quantum mechanics, what we're talking about is non-physicality and physicality. So the wave function is non-physical. It's how the information is moving through space-time to the points of reception. So your receptor cells are those points of reception. And every receptor cell is sort of a portal that has to absorb that information first. And it's then converted to an electrical pulse. And then now we're in the realm of neuroscience and the ways that your nervous system, your respiratory system, your circulatory system, all of these systems are working together to move the information through your body to the particular, let's say, organs that each have their own functions, so on and so forth. Jeremy, welcome. When it comes to your senses, think of them as sort of the bridge between the thoughts and the feelings. So your sensations are basically there to present the information. So the more intense the signal, that means the amplitude of the waveform is greater. The more relevant that information is in that particular place in time. So the more intensely you feel these sensations, the more you should pay attention at that moment. Okay? Now, you can ignore your feelings And if you ignore your feelings, it's because you don't trust your intuition. That's perfectly fine. We're going to have many experiences where we get to experiment. We get to fine tune our senses, starting with our 5 basic senses. And then we're going to learn how to sense non-physicality. So the 2 hyperstates of physicality and non-physicality are very simple. You perceive the physical realities through your 5 basic senses, and then you use your 3 non-physical senses, and I call this the infinity trinity of space, motion, and time, to continue the reception and the process of perception, which converts the signal to the more pure form of communication, which is feelings. So we have the beginnings of understanding. The beginnings of knowing anything is conducted through the consciousness or the thought process. So to think about something requires you to observe it. Now, you can observe things using any one of your 5 senses. Now, if you believe that what you see is actually happening, that's going to get your attention. However, if you come to the conclusion, or the opinion, I should say, of why you think that thing exists, and you predetermine its value, and you are judgmental or prejudicial, then what happens is you're only believing a very small portion. And remember, that portion is only 0.0035% accurate. Okay? Now, it's still true. Okay? It's partially true, but it doesn't provide you with the entire message. Okay? So how do you obtain the 99.9965% of the remaining information? You use your other 4 senses. Very, very simple. Okay? Now, common sense has everything to do with using your 5 senses. If, for example, you touch a burning stove, okay, do you need to use your eyes, your sense of sight, your sense of sound, your sense of smell, or your sense of taste in order to ascertain the valuable information telling you what you need to do next? Of course not. Your sense of touch is sufficient. Why? Because the intensity of the signal is going to be very high. You're going to know immediately what to do next. You're going to, at instantaneous speeds, make these calculations of force and velocity vectors and angles and motion, and you're going to pull your hand away. Okay? You're not going to sit there and think about it. You're going to know for absolute certainty how it feels to be burned, and you're going to know what to do to stop that process from occurring. You will learn that lesson at whatever age it first happens. And for some of us, it might be a very young age, and it's going to be an imprinted memory. It's going to maybe even include a physical scar to remind you. Okay? Welcome, Lihunani. I appreciate you guys joining. The discussion for today is how to have superhuman faith. So we're talking about perception, how to basically access the information using all 8 of your, I'm going to call them earthly senses. There are other senses that we are going to become aware of through this process, through this experience, which is basically an experiment, okay? Jeremy says, I spoke with a sister today who was logical in her thoughts. I said, I feel people are more comfortable being awake at night versus day by past life experiences. She said, science has proven it's genetic. I feel her logical mind and perception blocks the truth of Akashic records within herself. The logical mind in many ways can keep us from truly sensing and knowing. Yes. Now, if you are taking a balanced approach, and this is something that I spoke about and I wrote about And the title of the article is Neutral Observational Perception, and it has everything to do with using both the logical and intuitive portions of our mind in order to access the information. Now, the Akashic Records is sort of the storage space of all the information that has ever been known in the universe. Okay? Now, some of us are going to understand that from a standpoint of quantum mechanics. And the Higgs field, I believe, is another name for the Akashic Records. Quantum entanglement is evidence of how everything is already connected, so on and so forth. Okay? So, trust your intuition. Trusting your intuition requires faith because you are placing value on things that you cannot see. So feelings are non-physical entities. And I can prove that because you cannot tell me that you can see a feeling. Now, with that being said, and remembering that anything is possible, there might be a way to evolve to a point of awareness where you can see feelings with your own eyes. Currently, it seems apparent that it's more important for us to learn how to trust what we cannot see by having faith in our feelings, trusting our intuition. And why? Well, that's simple. It has everything to do with how to use your belief system. Raphael, welcome. Jeremy says love. Yes. So love is the most powerful feeling in the universe. Now, I've seen people make statements that they don't believe that love is a feeling. I think love is the Holy Spirit. It's felt. It's more than a feeling because it's really the source of everything. So if you want to know the absolute truth about what is the source of everything, it's love. Now, we can better understand our relationship to God by having faith, trusting our feelings, and simply having the conversations. And remember, feelings are the most effective form of communication in the universe because they are the most easily translatable form of language. Therefore, everything that exists in this physical realm that we call the universe has the capacity to feel. Now, that includes inorganic materials such as water. Okay, Dr. Masaru Emoto conducted experiments years ago where he verified how water is conscious. And he did that by placing certain words on glasses of water. Then he froze the water, and then he took photographs of the water crystals. Now, words such as hate and love had very obvious differences in the formation of the water crystals. So more of the positive types of vibrations, such as love and faith and joy and hope, showed us the evidence of a more symmetrical formation of the water crystals. Whereas words such as hate and hell, there's plenty of examples. The idea is those negative words showed that the water crystals were malformed. They were asymmetrical. They were sort of just confused looking. Okay. What's up, Murray? Kathleen says, can you see feeling through expressions? You can see the effects of feelings through the expressions. So your consciousness can observe reality, and it also creates the reality. So the reality is caused by the collapse of the wave function, which the consciousness is responsible for. And these collapses result in the effects of what we see, what we observe. Murray says, good morning, happy Friday from Australia. What's up, Michael? Murray says, what's up, Murray? Welcome. Jeremy says, I've been in recovery meetings and saw deep yellow and angry emotion coming up from someone who was purging and venting after they share the shares. They had a white indigo and purple coming from them. The transmuted into divine white aura, which I feel is universal peaceful love balance. Cool. So when you can see their auras, I suppose that is evidence that you're seeing their feelings. I still think it's the effects of their feelings. So I'm going to, at least for the time being, hold true to the idea that feelings are non-physical, therefore invisible. However, we can observe the effects of the feelings, which we I should say, some people can see auras, for example. When you see the auras, you're observing light that's actually happening outside of the visible light portion of the spectrum. So there are some animals that see, for example, infrared. Dogs are a great example of that. They don't see with their eyes the infrared. They actually see with their sense of smell. So it's super interesting. Bees can see ultraviolet light, and that's interesting. That's amazing to me. The ability to read auras is a gift. Jeremy says reading auras is more of the emotional vibration. Yes. So people that are highly empathic will be able to see the auras, partly and actually mostly because of their belief system. If you are intuitive and empathic, and let's say you have that ability to really feel the emotions of other human beings, but you don't believe it, if you're too logical and too measured and too rational. So the idea of rationality versus irrationality. Is it irrational to use your imagination to the extent that you know that anything is possible? Yeah, it's highly irrational. It almost is nonsensical, because we're not talking about the ability to use your 5 basic senses. We're talking about extrasensory perception. We're talking about clairvoyance, telepathy, telekinesis, these sorts of things. And I wrote about consciousness being a state of matter, and I posted it yesterday. I highly encourage people to read it, because I made the connections between consciousness, energy, and matter. And I'm able to also use the zeroth law of thermodynamics, which basically states if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. So consciousness is a type of matter. So super interesting. Jeremy says, agreed, the emotional body, you're spot on, I feel. Okay, cool. I appreciate that. Now, emotional content, energy in motion, emotions, will deliver and move this information that we are receiving through our 5 basic senses, and sort of connect the thoughts with the feelings. So it's interesting. So the connection between the mind and the body is the emotions, and it's a very useful system. When somebody tells you, stop being so emotional, or you have to control your emotions, I say, no. I very rarely say that people are wrong, but that's just flat out wrong. Your emotional body is a system of connection. It makes the experience real. If we had no emotions, if we were totally psychopaths, then we would experience reality in a much different fashion than what most people experience. Psychopaths and sociopaths are similar in terms of how they feel emotions, and it's super interesting. Jeremy says that perfectly makes sense. Consciousness is a form of matter. Yeah, absolutely. So if E equals mc squared, and we can accept that energy and matter are related, why not make the connection between consciousness and matter? Consciousness is certainly causal. What is it causing? It's causing reality to happen before your very eyes. Now, when it comes to having faith, this is again a skill. It's an ability. It's a level of awareness. It has everything to do with your belief system. Jeremy says, allow it to flow, the emotion, indeed. Society tells us not to be authentic. Yes. Now, causality, or karma, if you like, is going to show us the way. It's going to guide us. It's going to provide us with consequences to our actions. Without consequences, you have no way to understand why whatever you did was meant to happen. So if, for example, you simply love one another, what is the consequences of that type of living? You're going to feel loved. You're going to feel peaceful. You're going to feel happy. Now, what are the consequences of being hateful and spiteful and destructive? Well, you're going to feel miserable. You're going to suffer. You're going to someday realize that you're causing it to happen. Okay? So the belief system. It comes down to the belief system. Everything. Everything that we do, everything that we say, every action that we take is based upon what we believe in. Now, some of the beliefs are going to be limiting. All beliefs are paradoxical because they are partially true. Until you know why something exists, you are only going to have a degree of knowing ranging from opinions to beliefs. Okay? Once you know why something exists, and I don't care what it is, you may or may not feel the need to further investigate and research the functionality of that thing. For example, once you have, let's say, absolute faith and trust in God, if you are peaceful with your understanding of sort of how God works or the functionality of God, you're going to be in a state of existence that is peaceful. If you are still confused or triggered or angered or disturbed by the notions that, oh my gosh, how can God exist if there's pain and suffering in the world, for example? It's easy to understand why people feel that way. Do you want to feel better about your perceptions of reality? Then ask the questions. Ronnie, welcome. Raphael says, emotional autonomy can be mapped out in 0 dimensions if the emotion is fully self-contained with no trajectory on space-time. That is not necessarily implicating that you cannot still be deeply moved by something. Perfect. I love that. Somebody made a comment about something I wrote, and I believe it had to do with the idea of neutral observational perception. And their idea was that if you are neutrally observing reality, that you are not, so then they believe that you would be apathetic. And I don't believe that to be the case. If you are neutral, you are perfectly open-minded to actually experiencing the interaction prior to predetermining its value. So the idea with neutrality is that of balance. Take a balanced approach. And your three-dimensional state of being has everything to do with the mind, the body, and the emotions. So if you, for example, feel like you're stuck in 3D, then what you can do is become more aware of your consciousness and simultaneously become more conscious of your awareness. So that will bring you into the five-dimensional existence. And I'm going to be writing today about five-dimensional consciousness. And it's important to make these connections because once you understand the relationships between these systems, then you're going to have a better understanding of why they exist. And remember, once you accept why something exists wholeheartedly, and that requires faith, by the way, because God works in mysterious ways. If you choose to be judgmental and say, oh my gosh, somebody made a comment on something that I commented on in one of these other groups. I think it's one of the universe groups. They believe that God is an absentee father, and they believe that because they view the suffering of children as a bad thing, so on and so forth. And that makes sense. I get that. I can see that point of view. If you have absolute faith that God loves us all unconditionally, you will know that innocent beings never suffer. Okay? Now, you may be perceiving what you think is suffering, but you have no idea of how that person feels about the reality. You can only make assumptions. You can make guesses based upon what they see, what they do, how they express themselves. And you can guess, but you can only know one thing for absolute certainty, and that's how you are currently feeling. Everything else is a belief. It's an idea. Welcome, Claude. Raphael, got to get back to work. Cool beans, 0 point energy within inside yourself. I love that. Thank you for joining us, Raphael. I would love to have a conversation with you in the near future, so let me know when you're up for that, okay? Welcome, John. Okay, so I feel like now would be a good time to get into some particular readings. So stand by. I'm going to be reading some of my favorite verses that have to do with faith. I believe that Jesus Christ taught us a lot, taught us how to love one another, how to forgive, how not to be judgmental. I do believe the most important lesson is regarding faith. Okay, so I'm going to read some passages starting with Mark 11. Let's say I'll just do 11:22 through 24. How's that? Okay, here we go. Mark 11:22 through 24. And this is called the prayer of faith, by the way. And Jesus answering saith unto them, have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatever he saith. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. How's that? I read yesterday Matthew 7:1 through 7:7, and Matthew 7:1 is judge not lest you be judged yourself. Matthew 7:7 is ask and ye shall receive, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door will be open. I believe that falls very nicely into the teachings of faith. And I'm going to read some more. So thank you for bearing with me. Welcome, Lore, by the way. All right. Luke 17:6. And the Lord said, if ye had faith as a grain of mustard seed, you might say unto this sycamine tree, be thou plucked up by the root, and be thou planted in the sea, and it should obey you. Okay? Some of these may sound familiar. Some of these may not. A big part of my teachings have to do with being open-minded to receiving information from whatever source you experience. All right. Now I'm going to read one of my all-time favorites that inspired me to do what I do. It is John 14:12. Okay, here we go. Gray Wolf is talking about Mark 11:22. Actually, I could read that if you like, and then I'll get back to John 14:12. Okay, stand by. Mark 11:22. Mark 11:22. Yeah, and this parallels. So the great thing about the disciples is that they interpreted the messages in their own way. So you will see parallels. So Mark 11:22, and Jesus answering saith unto them, have faith in God. Simple. Simple. Now you can be less faithful and more fearful in the interpretation of that simple message. And if you do so, you're being judgmental. Because you're claiming to understand or know how God operates. Can anyone make that claim? Well, I believe Jesus Christ was the most aware human being to ever grace us with his presence on earth. And therefore, if only one human being ever had that level of awareness or knowledge, it would be Jesus. And that's based upon his teachings. And it includes many of what was left out of the Bible at the Council of Nicaea. I believe that was 326 AD, if I'm not mistaken. It's either 326 or 325 AD. Anyway. Yes. The information has been manipulated to the point of it being discarded because they know how powerful the information is. So seek the truth. Don't worry about the idea that religion is man-made and manipulates people, so on and so forth, because you have the ability to come to your own conclusions. And what is the evidence? It's the Word of God. It's the sacred text. And not just the Bible, but the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, and even the Quran has wisdom that is there for you to better understand how to relate to God. And every story in the Bible, and there's approximately, I believe, 35 authors covering a span of 1,500 years that are simply expressing their interpretation of reality based upon their own personal experiences. Okay, John 14:12. Where are you? Here we go. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also. And greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father. I'm imagining a mic drop moment with that. Now, what's your interpretation of that passage? It's Jesus Christ speaking. It's Jesus Christ basically challenging us. I'll call it a double dare. No, a triple dog dare. How's that? To use your faith to inspire others, to perform miracles, to create a reality that will resonate with other human beings. Why? Because it resonates with you. If something doesn't resonate with you, it's because it doesn't make sense. It's confusing. You don't understand why it exists. If you want to better understand something, use more of your senses, starting with your 5 basic senses. Don't just rely on your sense of sight to ascertain the overall value of the information, because you're only being partially accurate. Liz says, ask and you will find. Yes. Be careful what you ask for, because you are going to get it, because you are creating it. Don't take my word for it. Practice your skills of observation, your means of self-expression, and observe the responses and the reactions. Don't worry if somebody reacts negatively to what you are saying if you are being truthful. When we are honest and we are sincerely seeking the truth, what happens is it's going to disturb those that have not accepted the truth in the light being sound. So, what is the only thing that is required of one who wishes to seek the truth? Faith. Having faith it's an ability. It's a skill. It's a level of awareness. It's a level of trust. It's all of these things. And it has everything to do with your belief system. If you don't believe that God exists, and yet you have found a way to appreciate your life, you're going to feel peaceful. So God loves us unconditionally. God does not require us to worship him. There are some guidelines, the 10 Commandments, and that includes the idea or the very friendly suggestion to not worship any one or thing above God. If people even attempted to follow the 10 Commandments, the world would be a different place. However, humans learn the hard way. We all do. We all will suffer once we lose our innocence, and for some of us, that occurred at a very young age. If you are capable of accepting that everything that you've ever experienced was meant to occur and didn't happen to you, but happened for your benefit, that is going to require superhuman faith. And it takes practice. So you don't have to take leaps of faith to expand your awareness. Take small steps, baby steps. The journey is meant to be enjoyed and appreciated. Overcoming challenges is actually an enjoyable process. Solving problems is an enjoyable process because the result is the release of dopamine that you will feel more clear and happy. It's called a happy hormone. There's a handful of feel-good hormones: dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, and then there are endorphins that inhibit the pain receptors. So there's all sorts of ways to view the experience as a human being. You can view it from a scientific level. You can view it from a philosophical level. You can view it from a psychological level, a religious point of view. What makes sense to you? So all of the religions, including the ones that claim not to be religions, such as Buddhism, a lot of Buddhists don't believe that it's a religion because there's no worship of God. However, the definition of religion is to be devoted to something greater than yourself. And it could be an idea, it can be a concept, it can be a martial art. You could be a religious devotee of Aikido, for example. Zayad, welcome. Anything that you devote your attention to is going to help you connect to reality. And it takes time. Processing information takes time. I believe the greatest virtue that a human being can have is patience. When you have patience, you're allowing for reality to unfold before your very eyes. Welcome, John. Okay. So, having superhuman faith requires practice. It will begin with what we call blind faith. A lot of us have been raised in various religions that all require a certain level of trust. And blind faith simply means that you are not relying on your sense of sight to increase that level of trust. Hey, what's up, Monique? Welcome. Monique says, looks like I'm late. I prefer being on your lives. No problem. You're actually right on time. You arrived at the perfect moment. I've been going for about an hour, and as usual, I will save this presentation in the events section, and you'll be able to review it. And then, of course, as also per my means of better understanding everything, please feel free to participate in today's Now That You're Here. So we're talking about faith. We're talking about having superhuman faith. So why not have superhuman faith? If all that it takes to be more creative is believing in yourself, then believe in the supernatural. Believe in your abilities to use extrasensory perception. Believe that telepathy is real. Believe that telekinesis is real. Believe that clairvoyance and clairaudience and clairsentience, all of these abilities to communicate with entities and beings and things that exist in the non-physical realm of, we can call it the spiritual realm. Some people like to think of it as the astral plane. You know, all of these dimensions and planes of existence are as real as you believe them to be. Monique says superhuman faith. I think I probably have that. If you think that you probably have it, you are in a state of awareness where you are believing it to be possible. So anything is possible. Anything is possible. It required a lot of experiences, varieties of emotions, all of my current mental conditions, including OCD, ADHD, depression, and addiction, to better understand why everyone does what they do. You can tell me, you can give me any example that you want. I will be able to tell you why that person did what they did, why they behaved the way that they did. And it doesn't matter what their uh, mindset or behavior was. Um, I can just simply tell you why everybody does what they do, even without knowing all of the experiences of that person. So the more creative somebody is, the more willing they have been to sort of trust in their intuition, use their imagination, and believe in themselves. The more destructive people become, the more afraid they are. It's that simple. You get to a point to where, if, for example, you're experiencing depression and you have a bout of depression that lasts long enough, you tend to believe that it's going to last forever and you will never feel any sort of pleasure ever again. If you reach a level of awareness where you know that to be true, or I should say, you think that you know that to be true, then the chances of you committing suicide are very, very high. So be careful what you think about. If you continue to maintain certain thoughts, those thoughts will manifest. Plain and simple. Zayed says, as I said before, religion appeared in the age of humankind's childhood in the absence of science and logical interpretation to the phenomena around us. As you said, consciousness is matter, and matter is just another picture of energy. Brain is electrochemical machine, processes information. Even the concept of creation is just a mental conception. Brain operates in this way. Brain has mental tools like what, who, when, which, where, and brain uses these tools to create systems. Brain hates chaos. Yes. I agree with everything you said there. Now, the only thing that I would like to add is that if you rely on your sense of sight, which is what science does, so every scientific experiment is based upon what the scientist observes as the physical evidence. So even when you use, let's say, modern technology, such as these really great telescopes that they're using now, you still have to interpret the data of what you see on the display screen of the computer that is processing the information. The information is light, it's processed, it's converted to zeros and ones. Okay, so it does require a certain level of faith and trust in that science. However, it does not explain why the universe exists. It only explains how, or what, or when, or where. So again, my idea of better understanding your relationship to anything begins with the acceptance and comprehension of why that thing exists. If, for example, you have not accepted who and what you are, you're going to have a very difficult time accepting why you exist. Okay? Monique says, let me rephrase that. I do have superhuman faith. Perfect. I love it. I love it. And you know that to be true because of how you feel about that concept. Remember, the only thing a human being is capable of knowing for absolute certainty is how they are currently feeling. Even Heisenberg's uncertainty principle basically verifies that. And the uncertainty principle is very simple. It has to do with being able to measure one of two, what's called a conjugate pair or a conjugate variable. The most popular example would be the determination of the position or momentum of a particle. So if you can measure the position of a particle in space-time to however high degree of accuracy your technology is allowing you to achieve, you will be equally uncertain of the momentum, and vice versa. If you can ascertain the momentum of the particle, again, to however high degree of certainty your equipment is allowing you to achieve, you will be equally uncertain of its position. So if we want to take this uncertainty principle to a new level, let's talk about thoughts and feelings. And this actually connects to wave-particle duality. Feelings are the waves of probabilities, and the thoughts are the particles or particular information that you can quantify. Okay? So just because you are absolutely certain of however you are feeling, that doesn't necessarily mean you can quantify that feeling. You might be able to express it in words. You might be able to sort of represent it in certain art forms such as music, singing or dancing or playing an instrument, whatever. What is important to understand is that you are feeling the experience. If you know for absolute certainty of however you are currently feeling, you will know why you exist, because that is the reason. We are here to feel reality. We are here to process the information so that God will continue to know everything. And it is an exchange of information. So the more aware you become, the more able you are going to be to relate to everything that you experience. And then you're going to better understand how God works. And you don't have to be mathematical to conduct these experiments. You can conduct thought experiments anytime that you like and use your logic and your intuition. Monique says, please keep sharing. I have a friend watching. Thank you for being you. You are very welcome, and I appreciate your kind attention. Elizabeth says, thank you, dearest brother, for a brilliant class. Thank you guys for listening. Kurt says, lost signal earlier, brother, always powerful, informed, and wise delivery. Well, I appreciate that. I usually keep my talks to about an hour, but I feel like there's a lot of really great information to share, so I'm just going to continue. Now, does anybody at this point in time have any questions? Let me ask you that. When we're talking about the belief system, one thing to keep in mind is that everybody has beliefs. There is actually really no such thing as a non-belief or a disbelief. These are just variations of the understanding of whatever you're believing in. What's up, Lisa? Welcome. So when it comes to having any level of faith, what you're using is a system. The belief system is a means of maintaining the frequencies. You could think of your beliefs as capacitors that temporarily hold the electrical information in your system while you are processing it. You have to maintain the frequencies in order to make sense of them. And remember, when something makes sense, it resonates with you. Okay? The reason why music is so enjoyable is because it moves you. If it is going to move you emotionally, it's because it has meaning. It resonates with you. It's moving your consciousness. It's increasing your rate of consciousness. These increasing rates of frequency will create a source of information. You become more powerful the faster your rate of consciousness is oscillating. Okay? Now, the entire array of electromagnetic energy is important. All of these frequencies serve a function. So you have the array of information starting with what's considered to be the least powerful radio waves, going all the way to the strongest and most powerful frequencies of energy being gamma rays. And visible light is somewhere in between. It would be closer to the gamma rays. It's below ultraviolet and more powerful than the infrared. So knowledge is power. If information, if energy is information, then the more information that you have, the more powerful you will become, because the more aware you will be, due to the increasing rates of consciousness that actually is responsible for collapsing the wave function, which expands your awareness. Now, one of the things that I enjoy doing is making these connections between science and spirituality, between psychology and religion, between philosophy and faith, and it's all just doing one thing. It's connecting neural pathways in my brain, and it's all simply adding value to this experience. Monique says, sometimes listen to gamma waves. I find it useful. That is super, super interesting. What that means is that, so typical human perception in terms of sonic vibration, I believe, is somewhere between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. When you hear those really high pitch frequencies, that's going to be in the 11,000 range and up. What's interesting about consciousness, and I wrote about this recently, is that there's different brainwave states, and the highest one is, or the most powerful one is gamma waves, and those cross over into the radio waves. So again, the relationship between consciousness and energy has already been sort of thought about. But if E equals mc squared and energy equals matter, then it seems pretty evident to me anyway that the relationship between consciousness and matter is there for us to interpret. Whether or not you believe it is up to you. And again, your belief system is a means of exercising your imagination. So whatever you believe, whether it's a concept, an idea, whatever, is going to help you maintain those energies, those frequencies, those vibrations. So if you are, let's say, enjoying a positive vibe energy and you feel compelled to express yourself or to be creative, then what's stopping you? Anything that stops you from being creative is limiting your growth. Plain and simple. Billy, what's up? Welcome. Monique says, I listen to a lot of frequencies and waves. Awesome. So you're using your extrasensory perception. You're not just using your sense of sound to feel that information. So remember, if light exists through the entire electromagnetic spectrum, so does sound. Now, maybe feelings are just sound. I spoke about dimensions the other day. I believe that the 0th dimension is space. That space is your imagination. It's where everything is going to originate. All of your thoughts, all of your ideas and beliefs, emotions, and feelings will be processed there. The 1st dimension is light. Without light, you cannot detect physical reality. And that includes the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So every frequency of the electromagnetic spectrum serves a purpose. There's a reason that bees can see ultraviolet light. I'm not sure what that reason is. I'm sure it has something to do with their function of pollination of the flowers. Obviously, dogs have a very keen sense of smell, and they can interpret the information much better than we can. Now, because they have that ability, they are not able to see in color. They only see in black and white. So that to me is super interesting. But does that mean that they don't enjoy life? No, because they can see with their sense of smell the colors. So it comes down to appreciation of your experience. If you, for example, hold on to the belief that you don't matter, you're going to doubt yourself, you're going to live in fear, and it's going to be a painful experience. Monique says, I can see auras a lot more these days. I catch myself staring at people and animals due to this. LOL. That's awesome. That is a gift. So you are very, very in tune with not just your 5 basic senses, but your extrasensory perception as well. A lot of people view the senses of space, motion, and time as one thing. They'll very often call that the 6th sense. That's perfectly fine. Whatever makes sense to you is how you're going to relate to this thing called reality that we're all experiencing, and it's a shared reality. So going back to the dimensions, only because I'm going to be talking about consciousness possibly being the 5th dimension, as well as being a state of matter. What I have done with dimensional perception is reduced it to sort of different levels of frequencies. So the 0th dimension, like I said, is space. That space is one's imagination. The first dimension is light. The second dimension is sound. So light and sound is also described in quantum mechanics as far as wave-particle duality, with the lights being particles and the waves being sound. So don't worry about the order of these dimensions. This is what makes sense to me. So if the second dimension is sound, the third dimension is motion, because without motion, none of these processes can occur. So motion is the one thing that everything has in common. So how is everything sentient? Simple. They are all able to detect motion. So when you detect motion, you're feeling it. Motion is invisible, isn't it? Now, you can see the effects of things in a state of motion. So, for example, the water bottle that crossed the screen, you observed its motion, but motion by itself is an invisible force. We do have a way to describe the interactions between these different things. We have descriptions of gravity, such as general relativity. We have descriptions of the nuclear strong, the nuclear weak, as well as the Higgs field. And all of these interactions are describing the relationships and the changes in motion of these particles and objects. I'm on the mindset or the belief that gravity is sort of an extension of mass. It's invisible. It's part of the physical matter itself. And again, everything comes back to consciousness. Everything is related through this system of communication. If people were willing to expand their belief system and be open to the possibility of these ideas being true, then they would enjoy life much more than they are currently enjoying, unless they have learned to appreciate whatever level of understanding they do have. A lot of people are perfectly fine accepting that God exists and evil also exists, without fully understanding, let's say, the gift or opportunity and ability of free will, while simultaneously knowing that God has preordained everything, predetermined everything. Again, it's all about relativity. So from God's point of view, yes, there is a creator, there is an entity, a being that has to know all of this information, has to know how all of this works in order to get the ball rolling, as it were. So the presentation of space-time being the fabric of reality and therefore causal is important. Space-time itself is non-physical. You cannot see space, you cannot see time. You can only see the effects that these things cause in our reality. Now, the primary function of space-time is to get things moving. That's it. How does it do that? Well, it distorts, it bends. Now, general relativity and a lot of current scientists believe that mass causes space-time to distort, and then that generates the force of gravity to occur. I flip the script, and the way I understand it is that space-time distorts itself and it bends. So the more of a curve, the bigger the amount of matter that will interact with space-time is going to happen. So the smaller distortions are going to be more related to electromagnetism. So electromagnetism and gravity are basically two sides of the same scale. So the unification of classical physics and quantum mechanics combined with relativistic physics is going to require the leap of faith that non-physical entities matter. Non-physical entities are causal. Non-physical things or nothingness is part of the equation. And again, the two hyperstates are physicality and non-physicality. It's really that simple. Whatever you believe in that moves you, that increases your rate of consciousness, that expands your awareness, is perfect. There's no reason to tell somebody that their beliefs are wrong, because they're not. No one's wrong. No one's right. No one knows for absolute certainty what's going to happen from second to second. You can only know however you are currently feeling in your present moment of awareness, which is right now. I feel really great. How do you feel? If somebody tells me that, oh, what you're believing in is false, it's only happening in your imagination, fine. Hey, if that's what you want to believe, then enjoy your reality, because you're not going to be very peaceful. You're going to be less than peaceful as you judge others. And if you try to invalidate someone else's beliefs or you dispel their ideas, then you're imposing your will onto them. So the way that causality works, it's basically a guidance system. And cause and effect is real. It's the only thing that you can prove. You can take any experiment and you can look at the series of cause and effect sequences that will result in, let's say, whatever the final conclusion may or may not be. Cash Lane says, absolutely, brother. Awesome. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Monique says, can you put in simple terms on how to be okay every day, how to be well? I just want to hear what you have to say. Okay, here's my take on that. It has to do with appreciation. Now, I recently got out of sort of a double whammy. I was hit with COVID-19 and a bout of depression simultaneously, and it was very miserable. It was physically miserable, it was emotionally draining, and it was mentally very disturbing. Okay? What I remembered is that one thing that the Buddha taught, is the three marks of existence. Those are impermanence, suffering exists, and there's a concept about non-soul. If you want to, I can send you information on that. It's pretty deep, but let's just talk about impermanence. Impermanence, from a Buddhist standpoint, means that nothing lasts forever, things are constantly changing.
the correlation between impermanence and the first law of thermodynamics is very simple. The first law of thermodynamics states that energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply changes from one state of being to another. So, with that being said, nothing lasts forever. Now, even that has two meanings. The first meaning of that is that nothing that exists in a state of physicality is going to continue being in that state forever. It's going to change. It's going to change its form. It's going to transform. It's going to grow. It's going to expand. And it's going to die if it's a living organism. The other meaning of nothing lasts forever is that nothingness is a thing. It's a non-physical thing. It's a non-physical entity. It's real. How do I know that it is real? Because I've experienced it. And the first time I experienced it, it was quite terrifying and terrific at the same time. Okay. The idea behind not limiting yourself to the belief that you matter. So, in other words, always remember that you matter. If you forget that and you think that you don't matter, it's a limitation. You're going to basically suffer, and it's going to be quite a tormenting experience. If you know one thing, know that God loves you and that God does have plans for you, then you can learn to appreciate these experiences that we don't like. I don't like feeling depressed. I don't like feeling sick. I don't like seeing people suffer. There's lots of things I don't like, but I appreciate all of those experiences because it gives me the opportunity to better understand why people do the things that they do. Monique says, I'm slowly rising up from this hellacious episode. Thank you for your words on this. You're most graciously welcome. I'm happy to hear that. You'll find that it may be a gradual slope. My reascendance to the conscious rates of frequency where I'm feeling more alive and feeling more like myself was gradual at first, but it's picking up steam. And the last few days, I feel just more invigorated, more creative, more excited to share the information. And you'll see what I'm talking about if you go back like I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago. I took some time off. And the first couple of episodes back, I was just spending a lot of time talking about my experience and sharing with you guys that I'm not yet at 100% capacity. I was still feeling kind of low energy, so on and so forth, but that's okay. Let me see what you said. Cash Lane says, I experienced also the totality of everything and absolutely nothing as well. I came back to my body and to the realization you are me and I am you. We are each other. The place I experienced this was black but endless. I could also feel it had dimensions, like I was in an endless room but yet in a room. That's awesome. Yeah, that is a really great description of sort of this void of physicality. Doesn't mean that you were not existing. It doesn't mean that nothingness is anything to be afraid of. It's simply a place. Monique says, thank you so much. Cash says, a room. Okay, so does anybody else have any other questions? I feel like I've covered a lot of interesting ground. Hopefully you can take something away from this. Practice using your belief system. Take baby steps. Learn how to use your own creative abilities to communicate with other humans, other spiritual entities, and know that you matter. Know that you exist for a reason. What's the reason? Simple. The reason is simple, and it's the same for everything. Love. We all are here to experience love. We are able to inspire others, encourage people to empower themselves by loving one another. Every experience is a test of faith. Are you not feeling and observing and witnessing the end of time as we know it? Yes, this is the end of times as we were previously taught and conditioned to believe is the reason why we exist. We do not exist to be servants to others, to be slaves, I should say. There's a difference between being a servant and a slave. We are here to be observant. And if you are observant, you are a servant. You're a servant of God. You're processing information for God. And when you share it with others, you are being a servant to humanity. So there is a difference between servitude and being a slave. Servitude requires gratitude. So the attitude of gratitude is appreciation. So appreciate the opportunity to share knowledge with others. Monique says, faithful I am. Awesome. Cash says, thank you for sharing. With that, I'm going to remind people to check out my YouTube channel. I think I'm going to have some success with this new process where I'm using my phone to do the presentation and then my iPad to record it from a different angle. And then I'm going to try downloading it today. My YouTube channel is Everard Music. My website is Michael Everard. My last name is spelled Evrard as in David. And I also have an Instagram if you guys like photography. I'm really enjoying taking photographs, mostly of the sky. So if that's of interest, my Instagram is @EverardMusic. And my email is everardmusic@gmail.com. If you want to submit any information that you think might be interesting, please do so. I cannot promise that I will get to read all of it. I am busy writing every day, compiling my thoughts, and then sharing them with you during these presentations. So I appreciate your very kind attention. You guys are master students, and you're helping me better understand reality. And that means the world to me. And part of why I exist is to share what I know about reality. Yes, from my point of view. If what I say resonates with you, then feel free to share your interpretation of my perception with others. And know that when you express yourself using your own words, your own techniques and skills and abilities, and whatever art form you use, you are providing streams of consciousness to the ocean of awareness called the universe. Okay? So with that, I'm going to say namaste, mahalo nui loa, thank you, and I appreciate your very, very kind and focused attention.